Welcome to the podcast designed to fuel your success in selling technology solutions. I'm your host, Josh Lopresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus, and this is Next Level Biz Tech. Look at that. You can see Donavan super excited. Welcome, everybody. We're talking cloud. We're talking managed services. And more importantly, we're talking about how to elevate Azure and AWS for customers. So today on with us, as mentioned, Mr. Donavan Brady, Director of Solution Architecture from Rapidscale. Welcome on, my man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Donavan, we're going to hype you up in just a little bit, but before that, I want people to get to know you. So start us off. For anybody that doesn't know you, hasn't listened to you before, tell us about your background. How did you get into this space overall? Where did you start? Winding path? Anything exciting?
Yeah, okay, good question. So I have been in this field for my entire career. I think it really started because I loved video games. I loved video games when I was a kid, and I was like, oh man, imagine if I could make these. That would be so cool. And so I grew up taking apart things, fixing Xboxes. I actually started a business in high school building computers with my friend. And then in college, I became a computer science major and engineer. And I graduated as a software engineer at Logicworks and realized that while I liked software engineering and I really liked the tech, I really like to talk. So I transitioned from behind the scenes back end engineer into solutions architecture and really found my niche there. I really derive joy from working with customers, helping them solve their business problems and their business objectives, and helping grow the team. So when I joined Logicworks 10 years ago, we had 45 people total. Now we're over 500 people combined with Rapidscale. So it's really been an awesome journey to see the growth that Logicworks and Rapidscale collectively have achieved.
Wow, love it. Well, man, let's unpack this a little bit. So, first of all, we're glad that you got from behind the screen and got in front of the screen. So, talk to us about, in your role here as Director of Solution Architecture, for anybody that doesn't know what this Logicworks acquisition means for Rapidscale, fill us in on that at a high level, but then also what your role is.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know who Rapidscale is a full services IT provider, right? We help simplify IT and unleash innovation. And what does that mean? That means that whether you need help with your end user computing, whether that means that you need help with managing your infrastructure, or even progressing to the next level of public cloud, right? The future of technology, we have the solution for you, right? So we are that full spectrum services, migration, managed services partner. Logicworks has been around actually since 1993, but we had a few different paths throughout the years. Really, in 2012, we solidified our stance on we're going to be a public cloud partner, right? And so we kind of stopped doing our private cloud stuff. We stopped doing any on-prem work and went full in on AWS. And over the years, we've started to grow that initiative. Now we do AWS, Azure, and Google. And our primary goal is to help customers achieve their business objectives by migrating to the cloud, optimizing their resources, and improving their IT estate so that ultimately it can drive more efficiency and money for them, right? Historically, we've focused on mission critical, hyper compliant types of customers, right? Logicworks is certified and audited for HIPAA, PCI, high trust, SOC 1, SOC 2, basically any kind of compliance regulation that you could think of, we have it. So we try to focus on how can customers achieve their business goals while maintaining a performant environment, while also having security in mind from the very base level, right? And so with our combined services with Rapidscale under Cox Communications, we were able to reach whole new levels of the market that we never even considered, right? Yeah. Small little Logicworks, we were about 200 people big. There's no way that we could be as far reaching as with the growth and expansiveness of Cox, right? And of Rapidscale, which Rapidscale has already an amazing brand in the market. So yeah. It's a really exciting time for all of us.
Yeah, I love it. So I would say the channel, Rapidscale has a tremendous brand in the channel, right? As you mentioned, and I would argue that the channel is pretty familiar with the Rapidscale side of things, right? And knows who they are from a cloud perspective, at least. So let's do product speed dating, I guess. So walk us through, where Logicworks comes into the picture. If I'm a partner and I'm trying to go find the SKU list of products that Logicworks can offer me or help with, I don't know that we have time to cover them all in this podcast, but let's talk about, as it relates to the title of this, right? Elevating, hyperscaler stuff with managed services. Walk us through some of the products.
Yeah. So Logicworks product set, I'd say, breaks down into three different domains. The first would be professional services. The second would be managed services. And the third would be our platform, right? Platform kind of comes in on both of the professional and managed services side, right? But I would say anytime a customer is looking to do any sort of optimization or migration or really professional services type of project, that's where we come in. We have customers all the time, especially in today's macroeconomic conditions. We have customers saying, hey, we don't know that we're optimized. We need help. We want to take a look at our cloud spend. We have a fair bit of cloud sprawl. Can you help us? Absolutely. There are tons of ways that we can help you. We can do as high level as let's put it in an automated tool, get some understandings of where you're at, just spit out a report and say, this is what we might be able to save you, all the way through to, all right, let's get a couple solutions architects in there. Let's review your architecture. Let's review what you're trying to accomplish and kind of redesign the whole thing so that you're completely well architected from the beginning and already cost optimized and performant and all of those things, right? So that's the first piece, just the professional services. Professional services, as I mentioned, also really where we cut our teeth was with migrations, right? Customers that are looking to move to the cloud. It's 2023, about to be 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. There aren't as many customers that we're trying to migrate as maybe 2018, right? But there's still tons of customers that are trying to migrate to the cloud, right? And so, as I said, with our pedigree, as well as our focus on security and operations and reliability, that mission critical piece, our bread and butter is building out a well-architected environment from scratch for a customer, right? That could be a migration from an on-prem, that could be a migration from a private cloud, migration from a different cloud provider, right? Azure, Google to AWS, or AWS to Azure, Google, whatever. Or even, let's say you're already in AWS, but like I said the first time, pretty bad cloud sprawl. You built it 10 years ago, not using any modernized tools. It's kind of a data center in the cloud. Let's migrate you to a new workload in AWS, right? So that's professional services. Managed services, once we know that your environment is optimized and well architected, now we need to make sure that it's well operated, right? And so back to the 1993 Logicworks services of old, we've always been a managed services provider, 24/7 support, onshore NOC, making sure that our customer environments are always on, always up, always running, secure and reliable, right? And what we do with that is that third piece, the platform. We have something that we've built called the Cloud Reliability Platform. Now, I've mentioned the not so large nature of Logicworks, right? But we have some of the largest customers in the world, right? Under our management, we have the largest private investment company in the world, right? The largest private insurance company in the world. We have a lot of these, the largest healthcare exchange company in the world. A lot of these very large customers that have expansive cloud footprints, right? How are you able to manage such an expansive cloud footprint without people? Yeah. The answer is automation. We have to eat our own dog food. We need to take our own medicine, right? So we've built this entire automation platform on the back end that's proactively monitoring and measuring these customers' environments and remediating things that we find that are out of scope or out of compliance with what we have deemed to be a best practice, whether that's an industry best practice or whether that's a specific best practice for this customer, right? That could be compliance regulated, that could be reliability regulated, that could be contractual obligations for our customers. We built it into the automation of the tool that's continuously tracking. And so all of these things come together for that managed service, allowing our customers to grow, focus on their business objectives, focus on the business logic of their applications, and not have to worry about the menial aspects of managing infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, how do we grow the hyperscale by leveraging managed services? You don't focus on the menial tasks, right? You focus on the things that will grow your business. And so you offload those to us and the AWS or Azure or Google cloud providers, and just ride that rocket ship to the moon.
Love it. The next thought here is, I think the channel was very used to, for a number of years, just not being able to touch anything with regard to AWS and Azure and Google. We'd hear about these things and we go, I can't help you in that, but let me tell you about, this situation, right? We could go this way. And look, there's a lot of great products in there, and the customers had gone that direction, whether we had liked it or not. And so what's nice about you guys coming into the play, right, is that maybe our first segue into that was TEM, right? We could TEM some of the hyperscalers, but you guys bring a whole different dynamic to this. And so you could take that, to your point, in some of the products that you just mentioned. Yes, you could TEM, but TEM is just the top line of what you guys can do, because whatever the recommendation is, you can go fix it. You can go migrate it. You can go build it. You can go automate it. So you guys bring an expansive portfolio. So what I'm curious on that is, in the deals that you're seeing, I always like to talk about wedge services. So when you're coming into a conversation, all the deals that you get brought into, what's the kickoff wedge service that you see most common? Is it backup? Is it DR? Is it, I don't know if I'm overspending? I mean, just walk us through that.
Yeah. I think there are a few, and it definitely changes every 6 months or so, right? As I mentioned, the macroeconomic conditions this year has been heavily focused on cost optimization. But prior to that, it wasn't really focused on cost optimization. I think there have been a lot of conversations over time about how cloud might be more expensive and whatever, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But when people are considering migrating to the cloud, it's more so for a different business objective, right? And I think oftentimes you just hit the nail on the head. We hear a lot of DR, right? I don't know that I'm ready to dive fully in. I've got some infrastructure here. I've got a VMware contract, all this stuff. I don't want to just throw that to the wayside, but I do need a DR service. And if I'm going to do DR, might as well try it in the cloud, right? And so we hear that. We can help with that objective for sure. However, you'll hear many times throughout this talk that I like to focus on the actual business driver, right? So why are you trying to achieve the DR solution? What is your contractual obligation for uptime or RTO, RPO, or whatever, right? And so once they come to us and they start saying, yeah, we need this DR thing, I'm like, well, it might be better if we did this thing a little differently, and then try to steer them more towards just the migration to the cloud. And that is really what gets their feet wet, and then they fall in love with the cloud, because just the case that it is, it's way easier to deploy and grow than anywhere else. So DR is a big one. I think depreciating hardware or hardware refreshes, right? When customers say, well, our hardware is old and dying, we need to do a hardware refresh in the next year. Should we consider the cloud, right? And so then they come talk to us in similar kind of conversation. We try to understand why they're looking to move to the cloud, because as I was just saying, the cloud might not always be cheaper. The public cloud might not always be cheaper. You need to do it right. You can't just build a data center in the cloud. You can't just migrate all your technical debt. So we want to understand from that perspective why they're looking to move. And then finally, I think the cost thing, customers that are already in the cloud, they might get a bill that they were not expecting, right? Our bill just raised by $10,000 in the last month. What is this about? Because the public cloud is a variable cost that's always fluctuating dependent on usage. That usage includes network traffic, it includes data egress, things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it also includes something that you might have turned on and forgot to turn off, right? So customers get a whopping bill, yeah. And they're like, what happened here? And then they call us and we have to help them out, take a look, see what happened.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so Let's talk then. Those are great. I think kind of where you're seeing the wedges come in. That's good. Let's talk about everybody's favorite three words for 2023 going into 2024: large language models.
Yeah.
So I believe that this is our next gold rush. I believe that everybody's going to want to do this. Everybody's going to be told, it's just like in the beginning of cloud. Hey, we need to go check out cloud. Are you checking out cloud, right? Some C-level that doesn't understand what cloud is, but knows that they need to go check it out. So I think this is a little different, right? Because there's quantifiable value immediately in this, but I think it's hard. So Donovan's opinion on how things like large language models, which you guys have great products and you're right at the epicenter of, how are these going to drive customers' infrastructure and security needs in 2024? And how do you guys help?
Yeah. So one of those products that I didn't talk about that's nestled in the professional services is our AI team, right? We have a whole product set of designing and building AI models for our customers. Uh, how is that going to change the market? Well, a lot of people, I think, as you just said, focus on the buzzwordiness of the AI ML thing. It is everywhere you look. Just a couple weeks ago, I was at reInvent, AWS reInvent, their big conference, and there were some really, really cool services that were released, like AWS Aurora Limitless, which is limitless sharding of your data, right?
Mm.
But that was so minuscule in comparison to all the AI and generative AI stuff because the whole market is pushing AI and asking for AI, right?
Yeah.
So it is, I agree, that gold rush, and everybody needs to be in on it. However, they need to be aware and savvy of the conditions and the drawbacks. One thing that you just said is security, right? Uh, this is at present sort of an unregulated kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? There is a lot of data out there. Customers either have their own data or maybe they're using some other data set, right? People might not understand the data that they're putting into their models, right? And the way that
Yeah.
AI ML works is that it's continuously training based on the data, right? And there could be some nefarious or malicious things in the data. Um, or there could be nefarious AI models that are trying to attack you. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing every time I talk to anybody about AI is you need to get your data right. You need to understand your data strategy, understand your data sources, clean the data instead of just inputting a bunch of raw stuff in there.
Yeah.
Make sure that what you're trying to get out is similar to what you're actually putting in, right? Because you don't want it to be garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Aside from the security aspect, there are tons of ways that it's transforming businesses and how we've already helped customers, right? We've helped customers build predictive maintenance models for their operations, for hardware that might be depreciating or need to be replaced, right? We've built chatbots for customers. We've built image processing tools, right? There was a car wash that basically could take a picture of the car before and after and tell you
Mm.
what the aspects of the car wash were and
Wow.
things like that, right? But there are infinitely many ways that you can use this AI tool. There's another one that I'm talking to a customer right now. They ingest petabytes of data of phone calls, right? Recorded phone calls. They have a call center, right? And as we know in the channel, this is a huge thing. There are call
Mm-hmm.
centers for everybody, right? So, how do you actually make sense of all of these calls, right? Can we summarize these calls rather than having to listen to 2 hours worth of a customer service call? Can I actually drill down, get the summary, get the customer sentiment, understand what happened on that call, things like that? All of that is capable with AI without needing to use any sort of human intervention, right? Um, yeah.
Awesome. I love it. This could almost be its own podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to have you come back. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think
Yeah.
the summary on that though is all good stuff in that you're already doing this, you're positioned, and you can help. So I want partners to remember that when they hear this part. You guys are right at the epicenter of that. So perfect
Yes.
stuff there. Okay, so some real quick practical advice. Let's talk about for partners that are listening to this. Right, I'm excited. I have a better understanding of who Logicworks is. What's the approach though? What's the practical advice or approach to just help them start some of these and capitalize on figuring out where these customers are with regard to cloud?
So I always like to focus on pain points, right? Pain points and business drivers. Maybe we should rename the podcast Pain Points and Business Drivers.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. um, and so when I'm talking to a customer or when a partner is trying to talk to a customer, uh, a simple question to ask is, what kinds of issues are you facing right now? Right? What isn't going as well as you would hope that it could be going? Right? Um, and that just opens the door because once the customer starts talking, you could jump in on anything that they have to say. Right? Oh well, we said before, environment is too expensive, or maybe we've had some downtime, or maybe it's not secure, or blah blah blah. Right? Um, so that is probably the best way to uncover a customer's need, right? Um, Higher level than that, just try to understand what they're doing on their infrastructure side, right? Um, where are you hosted today? Is there something that you would desire that you're not getting? Things like that.
Yeah. No, it's good. Perfect. All right, let's talk specifically about an opportunity. So, what I love to hear on this part of it is how was it brought to you? What was the perceived problem? What was their tech stack before that you maybe displaced, and then what did you end up, moving them to?
Okay. So one of my favorite customer case studies is Serve Pro. I don't know if you are familiar with them. They've
Mm-hmm.
got the big green trucks with the orange house. It's like real life disaster
Yeah,
recovery, right? It's like your house gets flooded, they come and
yeah.
fix the whole thing, right? Uh, Surf Pro actually contacted us directly because they were having some issues with their database, right? They're like, we got this giant SQL server, and we've got a lot of things that are connected to the SQL server. We're considering how we might be able to move this to the cloud, right? Okay, cool. So another one of those services that's baked into the professional services is database services, right? We can help refactor, migrate, transform databases. We can bring it from a SQL server to a more modernized platform like a Postgres or MySQL or even NoSQL like Snowflake and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so we start talking to this customer, and this is actually an amazing story. So thank you for asking. Start talking to the customer. They're like, we've got this giant SQL server. We've got 1,800 franchises across the country that are all connecting to this one SQL server that hosts all of the data for our ERP system, right? Okay. They also had apparently about 100 backend applications that are all pulling data from the SQL server, right? Because it's all back
What could go
office.
wrong? Yeah.
Yeah. What could go wrong? Everything is the answer. So they're like, it's always going down. There are performance issues, there's latency, all this stuff. So we're thinking about putting a read replica in AWS. And I was like, okay, cool. How are you going to replicate the data, right? Between this read replica and whatever. And we talked about it for a long time. There are a few ways that we could do it: distributed availability groups or transaction replication logs or whatever. And eventually I was like, guys, we're going about this the whole wrong way. Like I said about the DR kind of conversation, we should put everything as the primary in the cloud and kind of rebuild it because the way that it's architected right now is not built for success. It can't be a distributed model as it is and expect it to be successful, right? 1,800 franchises, tons of VPN connections. Like,
Can
it's
we
not,
can we can we call out one thing? I think this is really important that never gets talked about with databases.
yeah,
Databases are really, really, really hard to scale. And it's
yeah,
not like I can just say, let me spin up a second database, a second server. It doesn't work like that, right? You can improve the compute, you can improve the RAM and all that stuff, but inevitably, like these guys, we're probably seeing a problem. So your thought is you just because of the expertise that you have, you foresaw that I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to make it a word. You foresaw that this was going to reach a point of contention and this wasn't going to work either. So I love that you called that out.
Yes, exactly. Because even if you build one read replica in the cloud, first of all of your writes are still going to go to this primary database. So that's the very first thing. The second thing is you have a finite number of replicas that you can build, right? And then every time that's going to be latency and transaction issues,
Yeah.
right? Versus what we eventually, spoiler alert, what we eventually migrated them to was an Aurora Postgres based deployment in AWS that natively can replicate across 6 databases horizontally just by default, right? So that even without doing any other additional multi-master or any of that stuff, you're already 6x better than what you were before, right? And that kind of compute capacity is only possible in the public cloud, right? So they were like, okay, you know what? We'll take your advice. Let's see what this might look like if we migrate the whole thing into AWS. We did an assessment and a design, and we said, okay, the whole application isn't that great. You know, it's like 20 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Had a lot of cruft that we could have improved. And so we were like, okay, let's come on site. So we go on site and we are in their lobby for like 2 hours. We try to check in. The secretary is like, our system is down. I don't know. Like I told them, but apparently they're working on something. So just hang tight. We're in the lobby for like 2 hours with nobody coming to visit us or anything. And finally the CTO comes out and he's like, hey guys, sorry about that. We had a data center outage. It turns out a squirrel chewed through our AC lines. And so the AC went out, which means everything overheated and went out. And so we were like, sounds like you need to migrate to AWS. It was like you couldn't write this stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a really good on-site. We did like this multi-day engagement, doing a whole bunch of whiteboarding and blah blah blah. And they were like, okay, we're bought it. Let's do it. So let's fast forward a little bit. We finished our assessment of their entire estate. It wasn't just the ERP system. It was also that 100 or so applications that they had on the back end. It wasn't 100 or so applications. They had about 300 applications. A bunch of them they didn't even realize were running because how many people, you know, I know you can't all raise your hands, but if you're listening to this, how many of you actually have inventory management systems or automated tools that are continuously scanning your networks and keeping track of your applications and things like that?
Yeah.
1% of companies, right?
Yeah.
So they had all these applications and a lot of them were not in use. A lot of them were still in use. And so we had to figure out, okay, what's the best way to slice this? So for that ERP system, we ended up rebuilding that into a completely modernized microservice-based architecture, right? So the front end and the top 2 tiers, the web and the app tiers, were completely containerized, built in an EKS-based Kubernetes deployment, right?
Nice.
I think there were about 8 different task definitions, 8 different containers per pod, right? And then the back end, as I mentioned before, we migrated them away from SQL Server and into Aurora Postgres in AWS. That allowed us to, as I mentioned before, scale, but also improve the performance of the database while also cutting costs by like 75%, because now you're not worried about licensing. Like you said before, scaling the database is very, very hard, right? So the only way to scale a database is to scale it up. Right. But when you scale it up, the number of cores go up. And when the number of cores go up, the SQL licensing gets very expensive. Right. So now we don't need to worry about SQL licensing anymore. Now we've got completely open source based Postgres engines, whatever.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then any of the caching and customer preferences or any customer data was going to be stored in a NoSQL database in DynamoDB and AWS.
Awesome.
Right. Then we got to these 300 applications on the back end, and we said, okay, these don't necessarily need to be re-architected. A lot of them are third-party, off-the-shelf COTS, right? And so instead, what we did was we just built basically an automated pipeline that was picking up all of their applications, creating a golden image in AWS, deploying it with all of our tools, because they had to be PCI compliant and all this stuff, right? So we built that golden image that had all the security and reliability requirements on the back end, put it in the pipeline, picked up their application, installed it on the image, redeployed it into the auto scaling groups, and basically rinsed and repeated this for these 300 applications. And within less than 9 months, we were able to migrate their 700 server data center into AWS. So that is one of my favorite case studies because it, as you said, started with a really small thing. How can I help improve my SQL server? And turned into how are we leveraging literally all of Logicworks services, which, by the way, culminated in them as a managed services customer, that they're still a managed services customer today. So great success story.
I love that. Not every opportunity is going to be that complex, but I love hearing opportunities like that because they're buying everything on the menu, right? So we know it works. We know you're good at it, and they know they couldn't have done it without you. And now the quality of that network, the performance of that network, the squirrel factor is out, and amongst other things, the scale and the responsiveness. I can't imagine how many metrics improved in their ability to continue to scale, and how happy people are and the users are. All the people running, driving the trucks, trying to access the applications, all those things. That's an awesome story.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so final couple thoughts here. So bring us home on next to last question here. I'm excited. Again, you've really opened everybody's eyes to all the things that Logicworks can do. So if I want to go back to my customers right now, I don't even want to listen to the rest of this podcast, but I want to hear what are the top 3 questions that you would push a partner to ask to open up doors like this?
Yeah. Okay. So top 3 questions. I mentioned one of them earlier. What are the primary challenges that you're facing today with your IT or your tech stack, right? This could be for your infrastructure. It could be for reliability. It could be cost, whatever the answer is. What are the pain points that you're facing? Because we can expose the pain points. We can definitely find an opportunity for us to come in, right? Plain and simple. 10 out of 10 times. Unless they're doing like Amazon Connect, which is call center stuff that we don't do. Aside from that, 10 out of 10 times, we're going to be able to find something to help ease their pain, right? So just to reiterate, what challenges, what are the pain points that you're facing? Second, business drivers. Okay, so now that we have discussed a little bit about their infrastructure, maybe we know that they're looking to migrate to AWS, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, what is the business driver that's compelling you to move to AWS, right? Okay, you're saying that you want to transform your database. Okay, why? What is the business driver that you're trying to accomplish by transforming this database, right? Because the reason why this is a very important question is if the customer, so everybody should go check out Rapidscale's website. We just did a research paper asking 500 senior leaders about their experiences in the cloud, and we got some very helpful data. I think something like 27% of senior leadership had skepticism with respect to their cloud journeys, right? That's a pretty high number to me, right? But I know exactly why that happens, because it costs money, right? It's going to cost money for you to transform your database. It's going to cost money for you to run the database, whatever the thing is, right? And so if they don't understand themselves what the business objectives are, then they're not going to have faith in the project once it starts, right? Sounds like a good idea. Then they're like, maybe this is not a good idea, right? So for all parties' sake, understand what the business driver is. And if they don't have a good answer, figure it out with them, right? Well, here are the benefits that you can hope to enjoy by doing this thing, right?
Yeah.
And then tagging on top of that, kind of the last thing that I said, what are they hoping to achieve, right? What is the success that they're looking to accomplish by doing this thing, right? Is there success criteria specifically, right? Is there, for an AI model, for example, let's talk about that. That's actually a specific question. What is the success criteria, right? Is there a confidence interval? Is there a 95% accuracy rate that we need for X, Y, and Z, right? So I think with those 3 questions, you can uncover any opportunity in the public cloud, in the hyperscalers, and then give us a call.
I love it. I love it. All right. Final thoughts as we bring this home. Donovan's opinion, any trends, any developments, anything, product releases that you want to share, anything we need to pay attention to in the market that we haven't already talked about, or anything exciting new coming from the Rapidscale Logicworks side?
Yeah, so we've talked about the AI ML stuff a little bit, right? Uh, just everybody keep an eye on that, because the services and tools that are coming out across all the hyperscalers, it's daily, right? They're coming out with new things. Customers are asking about it. So just keep an eye on it, so that even if you don't know the details about the thing, it's like, oh, yeah, I heard about that. That was a thing that released at reInvent, right? For
Yeah.
example. The other sub-segment of that is the AI piece. I mean, sorry, the data piece of AI, right? So, as I mentioned one before, the Aurora Limitless. There are a lot of data tools that are coming out right now, and your AI models are only going to be as good as the data strategy behind it, right? So, they're kind of intertwined in the market right now. So every time there's a new AI thing that comes out, there's a new data thing that comes out.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for the data trends that are coming out from the hyperscalers. And then finally, from Rapidscale Logicworks, again, focusing on the AI, we have this shiny AI team that can help build any AI services for customers, any large language models that they want, whether it's built in AWS native like Amazon Bedrock or SageMaker, or if they want to do their own model built on a VM, we can do both, right? Yeah, I think
That's a
that's
lot. I love it. That's really good. I'm gonna require everybody to go back and listen to this 3 times. We covered a lot of good stuff, man. Donovan, that wraps us up, man. I really appreciate you coming on. You dropped a ton of knowledge today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you everybody for listening, and looking forward to talking to you all.
Awesome. Okay. That wraps us up for today. Donavan Brady, Director of Solution Architecture at Rapidscale, Cloud Powerhouse, managing AWS and Azure and elevating. I'm Josh Lepresto, SVP of Sales Engineering at Telarus.
Next Level BizTech has been a production of Telarus Studio 19. Please visit Telarus.com for more information.